The dog, man's most trusted furry companion, an animal we've fully welcomed into our homes and hearts. Every year we spend a fortune indulging the nation's 8 million dogs. It's fast become the most mollycoddled animal known to man. But the one area in which we spend the most money is dog food.
In the morning for breakfast, he has natural yogurt, a teaspoon of seaweed and a teaspoon of natural honey.
He supplements his diet whenever we go into the fields. He likes cow pats and sheep dropping kebabs.
One of the treats we give the dogs is fried chicken and fries. We have our treats and then they have their treat, so it balances it out.
I feed her things like chicken wings. You can hear her in the corners.
As a nation of pet lovers, we spend over £2 billion a year on commercial pet foods. However, there's an increasing number of dog owners who believe we've been sold a pup when it comes to what we feed our dogs.
So I think the public have no idea what's going into the dog food that they're buying.
When you look at the advertising budget of the big pet food companies, it must have an effect on the quality of the food that's inside it.
A very cheap dog food is cheap for a reason. It's not because the companies decided out of the goodness of their hearts to make a cheap pet food. It's because the ingredients in it are extremely cheap ingredients.
If there's too much or too little of one thing, it can really lead to problems quite quickly.
Dogs' diets and nutrition are coming increasingly under the microscope.
Skin allergies are rife, digestive problems. I mean, whoever would have heard of dogs with colitis?
Arguing that one particular processed food produced by one manufacturer is better than another is rubbish. It's like suggesting that one brand of fast food is better than another brand of fast food. The truth is, it's all the same.
But with many experts believing commercial dog food is a perfectly appropriate diet, war is breaking out over what we feed our dogs.
The claims that some lobbies are making, it's not really founded on any evidence. I think they have a lot of catchphrases.
The idea that manufacturers are making a product that is not absolutely safe is clearly nonsense.
Caught in the middle are our furry four-legged friends. Nowadays, feeding our dogs couldn't be easier. The shelves of our shops are heaving with countless brands and types of dog food. Over the years, dog food has become a convenience we increasingly take for granted.
Dog food was invented in 1860 by a chap called James Spratt. Before 1860, what most dogs ate was scraps and bones from the butcher and whatever was left over.
Mr. Spratt was arriving in the UK by boat, happened to notice at the quayside that there were lots of dogs who were running around trying to grab the biscuits that were on the quayside. We go back to the sort of 1930s when the first canning production happened. The Chappell brothers in the UK started to make the first product. Chappie is still a brand that's around today.
And then after the Second World War, as consumers began in general to want more convenient food, the dog food manufacturers really increased their production. And so that's when we see commercial dog food really taking off.
But dogs haven't always had their food served up to them in a dog bowl. The first dog to roam the earth, over 30 million years ago, was the wild wolf. The forefather of the domestic dog.
Wolves were the very first dog, and they are the ancestors to all our domestic dogs. Their genetic makeup is identical to that of the domestic dog. I think it's about a 0.03% genetic difference.
With a bite power twice that of a pit bull terrier and 3 times that of a German shepherd, these wild beasts are genetically designed to eat meat.
This is one of the muntjac that we had brought into us. It's roadkill for the wolves. We've got 10 wolves on site, and they all get raw food. The wolves that we have here, they'll eat anything from roadkill deer from the butchers, rabbits, hares, beef, chicken carcasses.
The domestication of wolves into pet dogs started approximately 20,000 years ago. Then, like now, the one man and his dog relationship revolved almost entirely around food. At its simplest, wolves would eat scraps of human food in return for hunting and guarding.
You can see why wolves did come from the wild to stay with the humans. And it was beneficial for them as well because they sort of guaranteed a meal. The wolves get fed 6 out of 7 days, and we give them 1 starved day a week to replicate what would happen in the wild. And we do hand feed 9 of our wolves. In the wild, they would obviously carcass feed and they'd gorge themselves on food because they obviously don't know when they're next going to have to kill. They can eat the equivalent of about 80 hamburgers in 1 sitting. A lot of people obviously don't want to be doing this sort of thing when they're preparing their dog's dinner. But I think we're humans in a busy sort of world and we don't have time to do all this sort of thing either.
But has the chase for convenience in the dog food industry gone a step too far? An increasing number of dog owners are deeply concerned that the welfare of our dogs is playing second fiddle to big business.
The dog food industry in Britain is basically a license to print money. The market is dominated by 5 companies. They have 80% of their market.
Independent pet supplier Scampers used to stock all types of food on their shelves. Slowly they realised that whilst there were a lot of different brand names, they were all owned by just a handful of multinationals.
What happened is they'd gradually taken over my business without me knowing, because all of these were previously independent brands. It's takeover by stealth. That's what they're doing.
When you look at the advertising budget and the packaging budget of the big pet food companies, it must have an effect on the quality of the food that's inside it.
I think there's huge ignorance. I think the public have no idea what's going into the dog food that they're buying. But in fact, what's going in is very low-quality product.
If you've got $1 billion business and you remove 2% of the most expensive ingredient, you've just saved an awful lot of money.
And the manufacturers are aided enormously by the legislation. The legislators aren't really concerned about what goes into it. As long as it doesn't kill the dog, that's actually what the legislation says. As long as it doesn't damage the dog over a period of 3 to 6 months, it's absolutely fine to put it in.
Coming up, as concerns around commercial food increases, today more than ever, owners are opting for alternative diets when it comes to feeding our 4-legged friends.
She has scrambled egg for breakfast with cheese, sometimes as a treat.
I'm quite happy to give them a home, but only if they're vegan like me.
There's duck, there's beef, there's chicken. I tell you what, with a bit of pasta, it'll be all right.
Stanley, what's this? Look. Stanley's now on an allergy-free diet, which is high-protein chicken and fresh vegetables. Sometimes for variety, he has a bit of scrambled egg or a bit of fish.
This is Shanmei and Melody. They are eating a vegan diet. I usually cook brown rice, mixed vegetables, and tofu. They enjoy the vegan diet very much.
As a nation, we're creatures of habit. So if we're to give up canned dog food, what dietary choices do we have when it comes to feeding our 4-legged friends? One option is gaining ground on the south coast. Brighton is the unofficial HQ of British vegetarian dog owners. Flying in the face of canine biology, meat has been totally removed from their dogs' diets.
If you have a dog living in your home, you become responsible for feeding that animal and you make decisions on his behalf when you go down to the shops. A lot of our customers are thinking about the nutrition, they're thinking about the wider impact on other animals and also thinking about perhaps the environment as well. But everyone makes decisions on behalf of their dog. Otherwise, you'd take your dog to the supermarket and he'd come out with a little trolley full of sausages and crisps.
We found that a lot of our customers, the problem they have is they'd like to do something ethical, like rescue a dog, but then they're sat at home in the kitchen, about to feed their dog and about to spoon out a can full of other animals that were less fortunate.
And if vegetarian dogs seem strange, what about vegan?
Meat-free hot dogs. I've been a vegan for 26 years, and I have 2 dogs. I did feed them tiny bits of meat up until about 2.5 years ago, and I just couldn't do it any longer. I just couldn't open any more tins of meat. There's no such thing as humane meat.
What's this? Look!
Most of my friends are veggie, vegan, animal rights people, and so within our community it's quite natural to feed our dogs a plant-based diet. They enjoy the food, they scoff it.
But if left to their own devices, would Denise's dogs really go for vegan sausages over and above pork ones?
Unfortunately, the dogs don't share my philosophy, so given the chance, they would eat meat.
Come on then, good girl.
Being a vegetarian or vegan is really a sort of philosophical choice. So unless you're having a philosophical discussion with your dog, he's unlikely to become a vegan, but you can feed him vegan food and he likes it, he's eating it, he's happy, and he's staying healthy.
You can cook lentils and rice, and I think most dogs could live quite happily on a vegan diet, a human vegan diet. I wouldn't go back to feeding them other animals. People are always saying that human beings are meant to be meat eaters. Well, maybe they think they are, but I know I don't have to be. And the reason I take in dogs is because they're unwanted, they're homeless. I'm quite happy to give them a home, but only if they're vegan like me.
All the veggie diets that we've seen provide all the complete nutrition a dog needs. Since swapping diets, we've had people reporting benefits. Some people found their dog's arthritis was alleviated. We've also had one customer who had a dog that repeatedly fitted, but when they changed the diet, it hasn't fitted since.
There's an assumption some people make that our customer base are going to be some sort of vegan extremists and they're going to force their views and this diet on the animal. And there's some poor dog who's whimpering away, wishing he could have a sausage.
The way I see it, didn't seem right rescuing them just so that other animals would have to be killed. I think they're happy with their lot. And let's face it, we all have to put up with our lot in life. Life isn't fair. But it's certainly fairer for the cows and the pigs and the sheep.
Alongside the vegetarian option, a whole new canine generation is enjoying a cordon bleu diet with a home-cooked menu. It's felt that the main advantage of this diet is to know precisely what ingredients go into your dog's bowl. Julia in East Sussex feeds her performing dog Flora a home-cooked diet, including bespoke seafood lasagnas.
This is Flora. She's a Cavapoo, which is a Cavalier cross toy poodle. She's actually allergic to meat.
High five. High five.
She can tolerate fish as her protein, but I also feed her a lot of vegetables with protein, such as lentils and beans. So I'm using whitefish here, which is haddock, but you can use coley. A previous dog I had died from stomach cancer, and in my ignorance, she was fed a processed diet for most of her life. You immediately think, what have I been feeding her? I always said any future dogs that I had would have a home-cooked diet because I didn't believe that the pet food industry was actually being very true in what they actually put into the food. If, God forbid, anything did happen to her, I'd know it wasn't her food.
But for some dog owners, indulging their pooches with home-cooked food isn't about health, it's about luxury. And in the case of Hayley and her Maltese dog Betty, just a little bit of bling.
She has scrambled egg for breakfast with cheese, sometimes as a treat. She does have mackerel as well sometimes. And then she does have her roast dinners. She makes her happy, she loves her food. Right, Betty. What's this? There. She does eat out of a bowl as well, but she's a bit of a diva.
One worried dog owner was so convinced of the benefits of a home-cooked diet, she went a step further, creating a high-end pet food brand, Lily's Kitchen.
I started Lily's Kitchen because my dog Lily was really ill. She had lots of kind of scabs on her stomach and on the top part of her body as well. And I thought maybe there's a connection between her food and also her skin condition. So I decided that I was going to start cooking for her. So I made a few basic meals and within a couple of weeks she got better. And I thought, what have I been feeding her up till now? You know, it must have been something related to the food because the change in her was so dramatic. When I started Lily's Kitchen, I worked with 4 different vets, as well as a nutritionist and a herbalist. Our food is completely different from what you can buy in the supermarket, so it's not like this highly processed gloop. Our meat is absolutely fresh. We have whole blueberries in there. Some of the recipes have strawberries in. When you put it in a bowl, you'll recognise everything in there.
For Henrietta, the fresh ingredients of a home-cooked diet had some rather refreshing benefits.
I just thought Lily smelt the way she smelt, but when I changed her diet, she never smells now. In fact, I forget to bath her for months because she just smells like a, you know, a lovely sort of wet carpet.
But the ultimate, somewhat controversial way you can feed your dog that is fast gaining ground amongst British owners is this. At its simplest, the raw diet is about feeding your dog a daily diet of fresh, raw, uncooked meat, alongside a small portion of vegetables. The belief is that raw meat best mimics the diet a dog would eat in the wild.
There are a list of items that you should happily feed your dog. Look at that rich muscle meat. Rib bones in here, excellent free-range Devonshire duck, pork, sardines, mackerel. Some people pick up roadkill. I know people that have trapped squirrels. You learn to see the goodness in something like this.
Because the meat is uncooked, advocates of a raw diet believe it offers the best nutritional value.
As soon as you feed your dog on a raw, natural diet, you see the difference. Everybody hates having to pick up the poo. They're trying to scrape this awful, stinking jollop off the floor and putting it into a bag. However, you feed your dog a raw diet, and that poo becomes the tiniest, hard little pellet.
A couple of years ago, there was a situation where I had to go abroad. I got in the car and it took forever to get to Heathrow. I went through security and, you know, the usual checks, computer out the bag. The next day, I thought, oh, God, I'm really cold. And I put my hands in my pocket, and there was a poo bag. I thought, I come all the way from England, and there's a poo bag in my pocket. Now, if that had been conventional dog food, or let's say tin dog food, I would have thought the odour itself in the car on the way there would have put me off straight away. But because it was a raw food that I'd been feeding her, there was no smell at all.
Supporters of the raw diet include a handful of qualified vets. The UK's leading holistic vet, Richard Allport, believes that the right diet for your dog is the most vital thing you can do to keep it healthy and happy.
The holistic idea is to look at everything, the emotions, the background, what triggered problems off. Then you can stand back and look at diet, you can look at treatments that will help on all those different levels. And one of the first things I do now with any new patient is to look at their diet and almost always suggest changing to raw. And that often, even without treatment, makes a big difference.
You didn't like that one?
A bit sore.
That's all right. Okay.
Yes, I think any vet will tell you one of the commonest things that any vet sees is chronic itchy dogs. They scratch and they itch and the fur comes out, and a huge number of those will be improved almost overnight just by going to a natural raw diet.
I started feeding my dogs raw about 15 years ago. Since I've been feeding them raw, I must admit there have been less digestive problems, less skin problems, better teeth. The first week I had him, I changed him onto raw, and he certainly seems quite healthy and well, don't you, Poppet? His only trip to the vet with me has been to say hello to them.
You put a natural food into the dog, you get far more natural behaviours and, you know, a dog that thrives.
You hear horror stories from other owners about, oh, my dog's always whining, my dog's always barking, or my dog's always chewing. So we haven't got one like that. He doesn't do that. And it just seems a right pleasure to have.
A key part of the raw diet is also uncooked bones. Again, it's felt that if dogs naturally chew on them in the wild, why stop them from doing so in our homes?
Far more dogs will have much healthier teeth, will not need dental treatment, will not need dental extractions if they're feeding on raw bones than otherwise.
There's a couple of rules you must abide by. The bones you feed must be raw, not cooked. And you need to get a good mix of meat and bone and some vegetation.
Handling raw meat isn't for the squeamish. So some raw food companies have taken the blood and guts element out by processing it all into neat little packages.
It's like a frozen sausage, and literally you just defrost them overnight. Dried food would be much easier because you just pour it out of a pack, and it takes a little bit of time, but hey, it's nothing really. He's very content.
What's nice is that you can get really savvy and you can get some pleasure actually in sourcing some great stuff.
There's duck, there's beef, there's chicken. I tell you what, with a bit of pasta, it'll be all right.
Whilst raw feeders are adamant that a natural diet is the best way to feed a dog, they're even more passionate with their criticisms of commercially processed dog food. One concern is that it contains ingredients dogs don't need.
A processed diet has grain in it, for example. A dog does not need grain. It cannot process grain effectively. That is why when you feed your dog a processed diet which has grain in, there is an awful lot of poo coming out the other end, because all it's doing is filling the dog up and the dog can't actually utilise that.
Poor nutrition can also lead to other problems.
Skin allergies are rife, digestive problems. I mean, whoever would have heard of dogs with IBD, IBS, colitis?
There's a huge problem in dogs with obesity and diabetes and diseases to do with nutrition. And it's interesting, if you have a dog, say, with diabetes, your vet will often sell you a special prescription diet, which is essentially high protein, low carbohydrate, which is what they should be eating anyway.
The food is designed to look meaty, to look chunky. It has gravy. I would love to know what's actually in that gravy. Probably a mix of sugars, and that's why the dogs lap it up first, because it's really sweet. They get a sugar rush, they're getting carbohydrates that they don't know what to do with, and they start to bounce off the walls. What is most heartbreaking, and what we see time and time again, is when we're talking to rescue centres, is people will take their dog because they cannot cope with the dog any longer. It's untrainable, it's bouncing off the walls, and what absolutely breaks my heart is that if that dog had been fed a natural diet, it wouldn't have ended up in a rescue home. And I'm sorry, it gets me every time. But, you know, it loses its home.
Dogs deserve to eat what's going to make them healthy and extend their lives. In my belief, about 9 out of 10 visits to the vet are caused by the diet the dogs are on. We know with human health that if we eat healthy food, and in particular if we eat fresh fruit and vegetables, we lead a longer life and a healthier life, whereas if we eat processed food that's heavy in salt or sugar or fat, we're less healthy and we lead a shorter life. And the same is true for dogs.
Coming up, with commercial food now in the spotlight, some difficult questions are also being asked of the relationship between vets and the nutritional advice they pass on to dog owners.
Sadly, I think our profession has slightly been conned by the big pet food companies who say, we know how to feed, we know about nutrition. They don't. Vets should be the ones talking about nutrition. All we seem to do is go along with what the big pet food companies say.
What the pet food companies are called into is to really help out in terms of nutritional training for the vets, but there's no particular axe that they're grinding when they're doing that.
I think that vets get an element of nutritional training, but unfortunately it's product. I call it product training.
I think big, reputable pet food manufacturers, on the whole, have done a lot of research into the specific needs of our pets.
Molly, all her life, has eaten a raw food diet. I really believe that you are what you eat. And raw green tripe is really considered an elixir for dogs.
We feed them on a dry food. We just get stopped everywhere by people, you know, how wonderful their coats are and soft. And that food gives them everything that they need.
If there's one place where a dog's health is paramount, it's an animal rescue centre. For vets here at the Blue Cross Dogs Home, deciding the right food for their needy dogs is vital.
Hello. A good girl, and we'll give you the once-over.
Alison Thomas assesses every dog that comes into the centre and tailors their diet accordingly.
Kai is an adult husky. He had a bacterial infection, which we treated. He was fed a commercial, complete and balanced sensitivity diet. I think reputable pet food manufacturers, on the whole, have done a lot of research into the specific needs of our pets and what is going to be the optimal diet.
But could commercial dog food be a major cause of obesity?
There's multiple reasons for obesity in our pets today. Overfeeding is one of the problems. Many owners are feeding their pets to the point of obesity without meaning to and without realising it in some cases. I think exercise is a big issue as well, particularly in cities and with people working longer hours. A lot of animals don't receive the exercise that they need to maintain good health.
Not only is commercial food seen as an appropriate diet for rescue dogs, but at the most prestigious veterinary establishment in the country, the Royal Veterinary College, experts insist there is nutritional value to be had in commercial pet foods.
The requirements of an animal changes as they grow. So the formulations change to their needs. There's some commercial foods that are excellent. There's a lot of evidence to show that they are promoting optimal health. When diets are formulated for different life stages, it's not a gimmick. We now frequently encounter dogs that are in their 20s. And there's some studies that looked at lifespan of animals, and they actually can change by a few years depending on the food that they're eating or how they're fed. So I think that there's some truth to the point that food is having an effect in the lifespan.
Regardless as to which side of the argument you're on, one fact is certain. Most dog owners in Britain want the absolute best for their dogs. But most of us first confront dog food on our supermarket shelves. And with so many different types, deciding which one to give your dog can be tricky. For many, labelling is a major hurdle.
Meat and animal derivatives.
Derivatives of vegetable origin.
Fish and fish derivatives.
Minimum 37%, including minimum 4% chicken.
Oh, we've got some chicken. That's quite good.
Derivatives of vegetable origin have no idea. 43% meat and animal derivatives, of which minimum 26% meat.
Colouring, cereals.
And sugars. What does a dog need sugars for?
Very confusing, don't know.
The word derivative, well, it tells you that they don't want to tell you what it is.
I'm assuming people don't even read it and just give it to their dogs.
The biggest issue I've got with anything which is processed is that you really don't know what's in it. And actually, unless you try very hard to read the label, you don't know where it's come from. I don't personally understand a lot of the ingredients that are listed. I don't know why they're in there.
The Pet Food Manufacturers Association is the principal trade body representing the UK pet food industry. They're well placed to help explain why the labelling on dog food is so impenetrable.
The thing you have to remember about pet food is we don't have legislation written just for us. What we have is legislation that covers feed industry. So it's really aimed at farmers and people who are in the feed industry. They don't want to make different regulations for pet food, so they've lumped pet food in with feed animals, but they're very different. So we don't really have the ability to use the terms often that we would like to.
There's not really that many ingredients that you would recognise in the food itself. So things like animal derivatives, minerals of a vegetable origin. You know, I thought, well, what is this?
Meat and animal derivatives is what we are required to call the parts of the animal that we use once the human food chain has taken what it needed.
It's not going to be the prime cuts of meat, but they're not to say that they're not nutritious.
With virtually all tins of wet food and bags of dry kibble claiming to be nutritional, the term embraces all manner of weird and wonderful ingredients.
It could be hair, beaks,
hooves, tails, testicles.
The bits and pieces that nobody else wants. A very cheap dog food is cheap for a reason. It's not because the company's decided out of the goodness of their hearts to make a cheap pet food. It's because the ingredients in it are extremely cheap ingredients.
Most commercial foods also contain a wide range of additives and flavourings.
It's there to make sure that when you take that product and you've opened it, and in a week's time, it's still going to give you the same quality.
The flavourings are so strong on those processed foods that that's why other dogs will sometimes come along and eat the poo of processed fed dogs, because it still tastes like the kibble, because the flavourings, the flavouring enhancers and things like that are so strong.
Additives are there for many different purposes, but manufacturers will use them as less as possible because they're expensive. So they don't want to use additives if they can avoid it.
One of the key ingredients in most commercial dog foods is the use of colourants.
The way they make the dog food is they heat it to a very high temperature and it turns into a sort of grey goop. That's the only way to describe it. I was smuggled into a factory and I've seen it being made, so it's in huge vats and they're rendering it all down.
It's a fairly insipid colour. It doesn't look like what goes into it.
No one's going to buy dog food that looks like a grey goop, so the first thing they do is they add some colouring to it. They add artificial colours to it.
Colours that look like the food's been made in Sellafield.
Colourants are sometimes used because during the manufacturing process, the colour of the product degrades, so a consumer will want to make sure that that product looks the same every time.
Most dogs don't care what it looks like, they like what it smells like and what it tastes like.
Sometimes they're used not really for the dog, because the dog is pretty colourblind.
The bigger pet food companies are selling to the people and not selling to the dogs.
When it comes to the welfare of our beloved dogs, it's hard to find an entirely impartial opinion. One watchdog, however, is seeking to demystify the jargon.
So it says, healthy digestion, strong muscles, healthy teeth, healthy heart. Now, the problem is there's no tests that you need to pass in order to say that your food helps to promote a healthy heart. It says natural quality ingredients for healthy digestion, but all you have there is very, very broad terms that really could mean anything. I mean, the main ingredients: cereals, meat and animal derivatives, vegetable protein extracts.
A legal but controversial ingredient, propylene glycol, is another worry for many dog owners.
Propylene glycol primarily is a preservative in this one, but actually that's one of the main constituents of antifreeze. When you're looking at buying a dog food, the first thing to do, because there really is no way of telling what's in there if they don't tell you, if they do use these umbrella terms, then just put it back on the shelf.
There are certain rules about food labelling. So when you're looking at a bag, if it says chicken and rice, it has to have a minimum of 26% chicken. If it's rich in chicken, a minimum of 14% chicken. And then if it says with, it only has to have a minimum of 4%. And then if it's flavour, none at all.
Decoding the packaging isn't easy. So what else should we be looking out for?
Meat should be the first ingredient on the packet, really. So that would be sort of a half to 2/3 meat. You do want to steer clear of anything that's too high in fat and sugar. Wheat, maize, perhaps not so good, but things like brown rice I've always found to be a really useful ingredient for a lot of dogs because it contains a massive range of nutrients. A lot of manufacturers sort of go out of their way to make it difficult for us, but if you know what to look for, then you can really make the right choices for your dogs.
One of the most alarming accusations being thrown at the commercial brands revolves around them having infiltrated the pet healthcare system. It's felt that the very people we turn to for advice on our dogs' dietary needs, namely vets, aren't quite as impartial as they would like us to believe.
When vets do their training, they get about half a day usually on canine nutrition, and that half day is sponsored by the major dog food companies. And what the dog food companies aren't saying is, well, the choice is, will you give the dog a raw food diet, a natural diet, or will you give them processed food? They just start on the premise that the processed food is the only sort of food that the dogs should receive. So the information they're given is not necessarily the information that's in the best interests of the dog.
I think that vets get an element of nutritional training, but unfortunately it's product. I call it product training.
I went along with what was the norm, and that was what vets did. You suggested to commercial diets, and it was the beautiful thing to do.
I think there is a problem. Why can't we source independent education that is not branded? The pet food industry should be a partner and not sole charge of providing education. The consumer will benefit from having multiple views.
Indeed, with commercial pet food products often taking pride of place in veterinary receptions, it's felt that there is a commercial connection between the nutritional advice given by vets and the food on sale in their practices.
Every day you'll see their food on sale on the vet's shelves, and actually the vet will earn a nice percentage of sales commission for selling that food.
Unfortunately, a lot of vets are in a position where they need to support what they're doing with the sale of foods. So they have a vested interest in promoting certain products, and it's not necessarily the case that they are the best or the most appropriate.
You trust what people tell you, and they want the best for your dog, as you do. But unfortunately, I don't think in all cases it is correct.
You could point the finger and say, do you know what? Is it you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours?
I have a huge amount of respect for the commercial food that we feed. The fact that it's donated to us is absolutely wonderful. As a charity, we have to make judgments based on what is available to us and what is affordable. I don't believe that Blue Cross would make an economical decision when it comes down to nutrition.
But for those advocating alternative diets, suspicion towards the commercial brands and their far-reaching influence on the health of our dogs still persists.
Arguing that one particular processed food produced by one manufacturer is better than another is rubbish. It's like suggesting that one brand of fast food is better than another brand of fast food. The truth is, it's all the same.
There's a lot of evidence to show that a lot of diseases are managed by appropriate diet. Whether a lot of it's caused by commercial diets, that's the part that we don't know.
This suspicion about the integrity of the pet food industry is being stirred up by people who also have a vested interest. They've got a book to sell you, they've got a product to sell you.
Coming up, commercial dog food isn't the only diet to come under scrutiny.
I've certainly seen cases of dogs that eat a raw meaty bone diet with dental disease.
And some concerns with the raw diet are slightly more worrying than others.
Dogs are very prone to salmonella, and the salmonella is on the shedded coat.
I think it's important to feed a raw food diet because I think dogs really benefit from having healthy, natural food. We're told by doctors not to eat junk food all the time. Why should they?
Lucky gets Weetabix in the morning with minced soya. He loves that.
But things aren't as straightforward as we'd like to think. As well as worries with the quality of the food in commercial brands, there are emerging concerns about the safety of the raw food diet. The virtue of the raw diet, uncooked meat, is also its major drawback, particularly with the threat of salmonella.
Dogs are very prone to salmonella, and if I was going to feed, raw meat to Lily, the salmonella comes through on her coat, so she obviously sheds like any dog does, and the salmonella is on the shedded coat.
In the States, there have been warnings by the Centers of Disease Control about pet food having contaminants like salmonella, and that being a health concern for children. So the types of salmonella that are being seen in children can be traced to the food that dogs are eating.
One area of canine health that offers important clues as to the value of certain diets is where the food enters their bodies: the mouth.
Gum disease is the commonest disease that we see in veterinary practice.
Peter Southerden isn't convinced that a raw diet is the best option where dental hygiene is concerned.
I've certainly seen cases of dogs that eat a raw meaty bone diet with dental disease. So feeding a raw diet doesn't necessarily prevent it. There's only really one thing that really makes a difference, or makes a big difference, and that is brushing our pets' teeth.
The centrepiece of the raw diet, the bone, or nature's toothbrush as the raw lobby describe it, is in fact an enormous bone of contention.
There is the risk of tooth fracture, certainly if you're feeding larger bones.
But many vets feel there are more serious dangers that can arise from a diet including raw bones.
The biggest concern is when the bones are actually stuck We can see that there's a large amount of bony material in the stomach, which may or may not pass. And there, if the animal starts vomiting or has abdominal pain, that might mean that we need to retrieve it surgically.
The most serious criticism of the raw diet is the lack of scientific evidence to support it.
There's a lot of claims about raw food diet in terms of their health benefits, and yet all the research that's come out has raised concerns about their safety in terms of bacteriological contamination, their nutrient balance, but there hasn't been any to demonstrate any clinical benefit. The raw food diets, they're making claims, but they can't back them up yet.
The only people who do any scientific tests on the food are the dog food manufacturers, and not surprisingly, their tests come out in favour of the food. The thing about the raw food movement is that it's considered an alternative movement, and there's no funding involved. Because no one is making any profit from it, there's no money there for research. So what one finds is that there's very, very little scientific research into raw feeding. But I actually think what will happen is that the market will change in the future, and that the mainstream manufacturers are going to find that the demand for raw food in a natural diet is so great that they begin to switch the food that they produce.
I think what we're going to see in the future is all these big corporate pet food companies bringing out so-called natural brands. There will be the new Hills natural food, there'll be the new ProPlan natural food.
The problem is there's never going to be the same profit margin in producing a ready-made raw food for dogs as there is in commercial food. And therefore I can't ever see the major pet food companies changing.
With vested commercial interests, however large or small, on all sides of the debate, perhaps a trip back up the evolutionary ladder could help clarify things.
The thing about the canine digestive system is it's identical to the wolf's digestive system. So it has exactly the same strength of stomach acids, it has exactly the same digestive enzymes. So what one finds is that the digestive system of, say, a Chihuahua is exactly the same as the digestive system of a grey wolf. And as a result, they should be eating exactly the same diet.
You can't necessarily draw the conclusion that because a wolf eats a certain diet, that a Chihuahua necessarily would benefit from the same diet. You know, they're very different. The shapes of their mouths are very different. What they're capable of chewing is very different. The bite force that a small dog would have compared with a wolf will be hugely different. I can't say just simply because it's a dog and it looks like a wolf that therefore its dietary requirements would be the same. There are people that would suggest that even captive wolves have better oral health if they're fed a commercial diet than a raw diet. So that completely contradicts the idea that a raw diet is better.
A lot of claim about dogs in the wild, and dogs didn't start off eating commercial food. Well, nobody did, and there's a lot of things that have occurred because of improvement in food quality. A lot of it is based on people's perceptions and misconceptions about what is the right thing to feed a dog. Dogs are domesticated animals, and so they have evolved since becoming domesticated, and therefore their needs might have changed.
But if the debate cannot be settled by looking at the ancestral habits of the wolf, how can well-meaning dog lovers provide the best nutrition for their favourite four-legged friends?
In terms of is certain diets better than others, I think we're still trying to find that out.
I know that not everybody in the world is going to feed their dog a raw, meaty bone diet. If not, then next best is still fresh food that's been hopefully very lightly cooked, lighter the better. And that's fine. I mean, I'm not saying that no dog can exist or be healthy without a raw food diet. But as long as the food they eat is good quality and is only lightly processed, then that's still going to be fine.
I think that people should have a conversation with their veterinary surgeon so that they can make a balanced judgment on it.
People need to be educated in terms of what they're getting, talking to the companies about what products they have and what science behind that is.
When you're looking at buying a dog food, use your common sense, really. You know, nutrition, it's not rocket science. We all feed ourselves and we feed our children just based on common sense, and we do a very good job of it. And it's exactly the same for our dogs. We instinctively know, most of us, what a dog should be eating and what a dog shouldn't be eating.
People do have different ideas about how to feed their dog. That's understandable. But ultimately, it's the look and the health of your dog.
From city to swamp, Ben Fogle's leaving the rat race behind to tackle new lives in the wild. That's kicking off tomorrow at 9. Back to tonight and what drives a child to commit murder. We investigate kids who kill, brand new and on the way next.